Seeking the wise.
With Aaron and Alexander discussing the just philosophy.
Covering self-development, emotional processing, conscious relationships, and 5 levels of overall wellness.
Live from an undisclosed location is the Wise Podcast. I am Aaron Keith. Along with me for the ride in the bunker is Alexander.
So good to be here in the bunker, digging out. Let's see what we can get out there in the ethers today.
Yeah, I guess there's plants in the bunker.
Yeah, plants, yeah, a little bit of greenery.
Gotta have that fresh oxygen. Yeah, it's a new year, Alexander, and lots of people out there are making their intentions for the new year and hopefully working on themselves and improving their relationships is one of them.
Yeah, and then we're probably not going to go down this rabbit hole, but just to suggest that, the potential of getting away from the Gregorian calendar and really looking at spring equinox as the beginning of the year. So I still feel like we're dealing with some of those, still some of the 9 of the 2025 energies. I know people don't want to necessarily accept that, but I think it's worth looking at. That there may still be some remnants of the 9 before that 1 or the 10 actually really comes into full swing. But that's another subject for another day. We don't have to get into that today. But what are some of the things you want to get into today?
Well, just a quick comment on that. Usually I do the polar plunge every year on the 1st. Yep. And this year I just wasn't feeling it. So I decided to do it on the equinox, which would be March 20th, 21st, because I think that was the original first of the year.
Right. That's what I
right
kind of follow.
In alignment with what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do.
And I think that does break down to 13 months at 28 days. And the understanding was, it was suggested for tax reasons is why the whole Gregorian calendar started. So this is why, I know that you're into Western astrology to a certain extent, but that really throws a curveball, into that, and why I've never really relied on the Western astrology too much. But I do resonate with the human design and the destiny card systems, of course.
Yeah. So today I wanted to share a situation or experience that's happened over the past year. I think we've talked about it a little bit before, but it offers some interesting things to talk about. So this year, which is starting to wind down for me as I enter into, or I'm now in my Uranus cycle phase segment of my year. But I have a 9 of diamonds in my Pluto. And so we've talked about this, how when I hit my birthday, I brought it up when we talked about, what are some things that could happen? What does that mean? And we discussed how the 9 of diamonds is like, almost like a karmic payment in some way to something that will happen. Something could be a pretty substantial payment. And last year, around the time of my birthday, I had a roof leak, and it kind of was determined that I needed to have a new roof put on. So I was like, okay, well, that's my 9 of diamonds moment. Mm-hmm. So I can accept that, so in preparation, like I got some quotes, and, I went and I secured a loan because I didn't want to use up all my savings. And then I kind of procrastinated on that. And, that's how I do, I guess. And many other people in my generation, that's how we've learned to motivate ourselves, is to wait to the last second. And I think we've even talked about that as being like a trauma thing. And we can get into that. But there was also this other item in my life where I had my previous car, which I got a new car the year before, and I had my previous car, and I was selling it to, a former girlfriend of mine, and we had written up a contract, and it was never followed through, and both sides of us, are semi at fault for that. And it got to the point where I had to make a decision on whether I wanted to just let the car go because, she was in need, her family was in need of the car, and I wasn't. as in need of the money that was promised to me for the car in exchange. And the Nine of Diamonds stuff came up, and Alexander, you and I talked about this, about, what should I do? Should I ask for the car back? Should I just release it? Or in that moment, just say, hey, whatever you can give me for the car is fine. We can just call it good, just to, kind of wind down that part of the relationship, because that was really the only thing that was still connecting us. And so I thought about it, and what felt right was to just ask for anything at that moment, but then release it as part of my Nine of Diamonds contribution to the karmic world. And so, I reached out to her, and, she said that she would send me something within the next month or two, because I did tell her, I had to put a roof on, so I was trying to bring in any money that was outstanding. And, I never heard from her again. But I made peace with that, because she did tell me the last time we spoke, that the car has been extremely helpful for her parents, they had a car, and it was struggling, and her dad had cancer, and he had to get to his appointments. So she said it's been really helpful for them to use. And so, that kind of warmed my heart that it was being used in that way, and serving them good in that way. So I kind of released it, and I was good with it. And then, so about a month or two ago, I got a knock on my door, and it seemed like, like a solicitor of some kind. And I go to the door, and it's this kid named Aaron, coincidentally. And he was from a roofing company, and he was tracking a storm that happened back in May, where there was 3/4-inch hail dumped in this area. And I actually remember that storm very vividly. I remember looking out and seeing it all pelt the side of my house. And he said that they go up and they inspect roofs, and if there's any damage that could, cause leakage or deteriorate the value of your roof, that they help you file a claim with your insurance. And so I kind of felt like it was a scam a little bit. So I didn't agree to. I mean, I allowed him to go up on my roof. He found some things. He showed me some pictures, and then he asked me to sign this thing. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable doing that yet. And so I took some time to, over the next week, to research his company, and seemed very legit. They do this to help people out and obviously generate work. And it seemed they had really good reviews, and so we made a time to speak again, and we went over everything, and I filed a claim with my insurance, and the inspector came out, and they approved it for a whole new roof for my insurance. And so, originally I didn't want to go. I didn't think my insurance would cover it, because I feel like some of the leakage is around the skylights, and I was like, okay, they're not going to cover that. But when he went up there, he said there was a lot of wind damage, and the person who put the roof on didn't do a great job. But they insured it when I bought it at the time. They had somebody come out, and they thought it was okay. So anyway, I was just looking at this whole experience, and I really felt like, because the Nine of Diamonds is about letting things go, and you're learning that lesson of paying a karmic debt.
Well,
and the more you
let me come in there and
sure
reiterate that, or iterate that, nines are about endings, and diamonds are about what you value. So normally, it's a lesson in letting go. It is a lesson in valuing, getting clear on whether you value money more than energy, more than time. So when you get into the things that there are here to value, there's lots of things to value. So I did want to just touch base on that, and you're sharing kind of the way that you have worked with it, what we've discussed. But I did want to bring those general definitions in as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, being a double diamond card in the Destiny cards, I came into the world, and I've, very deeply valued money all throughout my 20s and 30s. And I mean, to an extent, it's still there now, but it definitely isn't my priority in life. My priorities have shifted. And we've talked a lot about suffering, and possibly when you learn the cost of lessons before you actually have to learn the cost, you may not have to learn, you may not have to actually feel the cost. And I kind of was looking at this in that way, where I didn't resist, I didn't cause friction with the car thing. I let it go because it was what was best for everyone involved. I didn't get my money, which was fine, but as we talk about, like, everything kind of evens out in the long run. And maybe because I didn't get the $3,000 or $4,000 then, that I'm actually gaining. I mean, they're saying my roof estimate is like 20 grand, which is more than, my estimates that I got. But so I'm just kind of seeing it in that
But yeah,
way,
you're
that
getting that
because,
paid for, basically. But
yeah, exactly. So in the long run, I won and I didn't suffer.
right, big key, big key. So yeah, continue.
Yeah. So I wanted to comment on that first. If you have anything to add about the um, maybe the balancing of learning the cost before you actually have to incur the
Yeah.
cost.
So here we want to talk about whether you call it karmic debt or you call it what goes around comes around. There's many different ways to present what we're talking about here. But when we look at things from a so-called global or all humans under it perspective type thing, see, if somebody gives to me, I may not reciprocate directly giving back to that exact person, but I may give to a third person, and then that person may give to somebody else. So giving should be about giving. And if you're happy to give it, then give it, and don't lament whether it comes directly back to you or not. You can choose to reside in the state of trust and faith, which is two of the four rules in the spiritual level of the just philosophy, which is gratitude and non-judgment is the other two, in the practice of trust and the practice of faith. So what this is an example of is that, yeah, you practice trust and faith that that car that you expected a payment for was fulfilling its duties, and you made your peace with not receiving that reciprocation directly that way, only to come around months later, maybe even close to a year later, to have this opportunity with the house to, have your roof paid for rather than having to bring that, even take a loan out, you said. So I think this is just a great example of that. Um, Pay attention to where you're pulled to give, and pay attention to what energy you're willing to give up if you're not getting your way or you feel like you're being taken advantage of or cheated. I shared a story many years ago about a turntable that I bought, and it wound up being a $1,200 turntable that the guy gave me for $275. But earlier he had worked on a piece of equipment and overcharged me, and I confronted him about it. But again, similar to you, I accepted it. I was done doing business with them until he made this gesture. And so really paying attention to managing your emotions and managing your energy field, and to understand that money is like anything else that you value, it's energy. And that if we trust that if it's going out, it wasn't meant to be ours, and we can trust that it's going to come in just like the tides of the ocean. So I think that's a really good story and another good example to remind people of that. That's why acceptance isn't about condoning or approving of. It's just accepting that I'm not going to go into resistance for what is happening right now. And, I won't give us a shout out, you and us both. We had to deal with some computer mechanical issues before getting on today that we've kind of been dealing with for a few weeks. But we did very well, I felt like, to not let the energy shift, and we just kept chopping wood and carrying water. And, with Aaron's help, we got it resolved because the issue was on my end. So this is just more and more proof that when things happen in our lives that isn't ideal or our preference, to remember to learn to live in non-preference is a big key of this philosophy. And these are all great examples of being in the situation, but not allowing the situation to take you over. So great story. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because I had some friends that I would talk to about the situation a year ago with the car, and they kind of played the role as like old me,
Mhm.
where I would tell them what was going on. They're like, "Oh, you need to hold her responsible. You need to hold her accountable. She should pay." Like the old like justice part of me,
Sure.
which is still
Sure.
there.
Sure.
But I have to tell it to move out of the way a little bit because our priorities are changing. But yeah, just looking back on that, it's funny that they were playing like the devil on my
Yeah,
shoulder,
inviting you back
and
in to that
yeah, yeah.
frequency of you got to get, you got to protect yourself. You got to set these boundaries. But we discussed in the very beginning when you were just considering it. Hey, if you're going to give it, give it. If you get something for it in return, then that's a bonus. But that's a message that we want our listeners to hear. That agreements are one thing, but if those agreements are going to set you up for a disappointment, then that's not highly suggested.
So Alexander, I wanted to also bring in the idea that I procrastinated, and so that was interesting because looking back at it, I'm like, okay, well, if this, if it was because I gave without expecting, I accepted, and maybe I didn't need to incur this cost, in my nine of diamond period. Why did I procrastinate? I mean, I guess maybe it was divine timing, but I could have, or I was preparing to do the roof, and it almost happened in like September, October. And if I would have done that, then I wouldn't have had this happen, and I would have paid out. But obviously, there's divine timing in there and divine order. So I mean, I guess that plays a role. But like, I don't know if the divine would reward me for procrastination.
Yeah, this is a very interesting subject that I actually had an old friend come and visit a week or so ago, and we got onto the subject because he was kind of on himself about some stuff he had procrastinated on. He's in his 70s. Um, and then he said something like, well, others may see it as procrastination, but he said, it seems like whenever I do it, that it works out. It works out fine. And so he said, he just paused there, and I said, well, let's look at that. Like, what if the so-called procrastination, um, and this could be a huge topic with a lot of opinions on it, but is that it could be part of that divine timing, and I'm even suggesting this. If you're willing to pay the cost of whatever the cost is, if something happens and then you go, oh, I should have, you get into the woulda, shoulda, couldas. See, that's the obstacle. And then guilt and judgment and all that stuff comes in. So if you're going to follow that everything's in divine timing, or in divine order as the first pillar in the philosophy, then acceptance is a big part of this. I happen to feel that it certainly could have played out like this. And if you would have a couple of months ago tried to necessarily gotten the insurance to look at it, then it may or may not have passed. See, we don't have any way to prove that. But we can be in a position like you are now, see where you questionably got taken advantage of, where you accepted that, and then the way that things worked out, you actually made money on the deal. And so then, the question is here, was that procrastination, or was that waiting until the right timing? And see, other people's opinions is going to be the issue. Our raising, the way that our parents operated in that way, is going to be part of the pressure that comes with that. So the main thing I want to get to here is the biggest point of all of this is, I say people are welcome to look at it however they want to, but just pay attention to what brings the most ease in your being when you're dealing with these things. And I've gone through some things, some plumbing issues and different things here recently, even the computer issue that we had this morning. But I choose to look at them as these are all a test to see if we're willing to be in the divine order of things, even when we're not getting our preference. And there's a sweet spot in that. I'm just going to say that that I've been watching for many, many, many years. And I think it's great that you're taking this opportunity to, to just kind of bring this up and say, hey, is this procrastination, or is that a definition of that's been given when you don't do it on somebody else's timeline, or, a timeline we set for ourselves? So I think it's a great subject, and I think people are welcome to look at it however they care to. I certainly look at it as divine order, and trusting, and if I'm, have to come pay either more time, money, or energy one time, then I look that I'll probably get that back in another time, money, or energy situation down the road.
Yeah, that procrastination is a big one, and I've been doing that since I was in my early teens, like in high school. And I think my generation, it's huge on, and people say it's ADHD or some coping mechanism. I don't know, but it's hard to motivate myself to do things when they're not due.
Mm-hmm.
But once it gets down to it, then I can focus on it and do it. Now, sometimes it does lead to more stress
Yeah,
and
see, that's the
more.
key.
Yes, yeah. So there, like you said, there is a fine line there where yeah, it may not need to be done, so you kind of put it off and do other things that need to be done. But then you're almost living in a situation where everything's on fire.
Yeah, see,
You
that's the
know,
thing, and that's the fight or flight, and I would suggest that that's not ideal to live in that, because that's draining the energy field. So see,
yeah,
if you wait till the last moment, but you're just like, okay, I got this, this is going to take me a couple of hours and I've got all day to
yeah,
do it, then
yep,
there's no issue. But if it's, oh no, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, I got to get this done, and then it's 12 o'clock and you still hadn't done it, and there's this frantic energy. Just like, for instance, I had a client call me uh, about a year ago, and she was having chest pains. And she was asking me, should she go to the doctor or not? And that's not the kind of advice that I give to people. I want people to do whatever they need to do for their health and listen to their physicians. But see, I'd gone through something very similar, and she knew that, and she had heard my stories. And I said, whatever is going to give you peace of mind, peace of energy field, if that's to go, then go to the emergency room. If you're completely comfortable with it, and it was a heartbeat irregularity is what it was, and and you can be at peace with it, then go on that information. And so she went, and she said she agreed that she was scared about it, and that she went, got checked out, and everything was fine. But then she came back and said, well, I probably shouldn't have gone. And I said, see, no, please don't say that. You went and you did what would give your heart ease, your heart and mind. So that's the main thing here, is that if you're procrastinating and it's creating stress, then I would suggest work with structure and discipline and accountability, and external accountability helps with that, to help in that area. If the procrastination isn't bringing stress and it seems to be flowing and working out, then there doesn't seem to be any kind of issue. It gets back to, what is it doing to you emotionally, energetically, mentally, spiritually, and even physically.
yeah. And something that just came up when you were saying that is the way the way we've defined frustration is like, pushing time. And when you're procrastinating, you're kind of pushing time. You're pushing doing things to a time limit. And if anything goes wrong, you don't have time to, you
It's
don't
going to
have
bring
any,
stress.
yeah, you don't have any room to maneuver there to fix it. And it's going to create frustration. So I wonder if people who have, the majority of people who have like frustration as a main theme in their life, if they're not also
Yeah, I
procrastinators.
mean, that could be part of it. That's all generators and manifesting generators, that carry the not self theme of frustration. And I know that that was, certainly the case in my life. It was just it was a strain through my culture of my family. Just everybody being rushed all the time and seeming like there's not enough time, and there just is. I mean, so I changed my work schedule, and I changed the way that I operated in all my relationships so that I could live in so-called a different time zone than everybody around me, and wouldn't feel these pressures, because I don't like that pressure. I would rather. Now, I'm not saying that I don't ever procrastinate. I'm not going to say that at all. But I have had somebody recently, when I was dealing with a plumbing issue that lasted off and on about 3 months before I finally got it resolved. And I had a great friend that, observing me through that. And she just said, I would be so frustrated with this and just upset. And I just went, but what would that help? And she said, well, you're right. You're right. And I said, yeah, I used to be that person. But, I'm going to trust in divine timing and enough efforts that this is going to get resolved. And finally it did. But see, the exercise in patience, again, is like the pathway to practicing that first pillar, that everything is in divine order. So the procrastination can be a setup for practice in patience. And the thing is, like you said, the decision is really about, hey, do you want lots of time? So if there's a hiccup, that you can be relaxed in this? Or are you going to trust that everything's going to go down very cleanly and you're not going to need that extra time? See, I happen to feel that you can learn to do that check in and operate out of either or. That's why I'm not trying to say that there's a right or wrong way here. It all comes back to the individual and how it affects them on all 5 of these levels, but especially the emotion and energetic levels. Yeah.
With your plumbing issue that you just recently had, was there a lesson in that you took from it?
Yes. I mean, it was a practice in patience. I worked with, I think it was 4 different companies, and this was one of the most simple. It was just a drain issue from a tub. It was really one of the most basic plumbing issues. But see, I was exemplifying something for a close friend of mine that was observing this. And so when she said, I don't see how you're staying so calm about that, that would really have gotten under my skin, and I would be contacting owners of businesses, and this kind of thing. And I worked with both companies and just handymen. And it wound up being a handyman that finally finished it. But see, sometimes we're playing roles, and it's about, how are we going to exemplify? In that situation, I felt that it was, how am I going to exemplify my work, my philosophy, my lifestyle with this uncomfortable situation that's going on for somebody that's around consistently? And so I think that's an important part, that the people that we're around and the way that our human design shows how we affect each other, we slip in and out of certain roles that we play for people. So the lesson isn't always for us personally. Sometimes it's giving us an opportunity to set the example so that somebody else can learn through example rather than just words.
Did you get that, like, during that? So that came in, and you were like, okay, I need to. This is the role I'm supposed to play in this situation, as like a reminder to make sure that you aren't, make sure you are checking in and not having any sort of frustration with this, because it did go over like months,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and see, and I had that conversation with this friend of, I even asked, do you see this affecting me on any of my levels? And she was like, well, no, that's pretty amazing that it's not. But she said it would just really be bothering me. And I said, well, and I said that maybe this is just an example for you to see that, hey, this is going to be taken care of. I happen to have 2 bathrooms, so I was slightly inconvenienced, but it wasn't like I couldn't use the bathroom at all or anything like that. So there were certain variables that helped with the stress level. But the most important thing was that, personally, for me and my lesson, because I looked at it, I sat with it, I dissected it. I even at one point just asked, well, maybe it was something that I should have figured out and done for myself. And I really sat with that, and I made my peace with that of, okay, because I didn't attempt to take care of it myself. I'm kind of like a do-it-yourself kind of person. But plumbing's one thing that I would just as soon not mess with. But see, I checked in with that and said, and it felt like, no, that wasn't necessarily it. And so it finally came around that that's what I felt like the lesson was the example that I was setting for someone else and the consistency of effort. I shared with her that, hey, it's not going to do any good. I don't feel like it's going to incentivize the guy if I yell at him, if I show that I'm upset. And the last time he came out, it was for no charge because he thought he had fixed it and it still leaked. And so, see, I felt like he was working with me. The universe was working with me. It was inconveniencing for him. It was inconveniencing for me. But we got it resolved. He got the payment that he was looking for. It was maybe a little bit more than I really wanted to pay. But again, yeah, I was happy to have it fixed and happy to pay what he asked. And so these lessons, when we're doing the work, I think that's an important variable. We can always get something from it. And what I got from it was that opportunity to practice these patience. And then also that it was for somebody else possibly. So, but always make sure that you at least get something out of it yourself, even when you think that you may be doing something that's an example for somebody else.
Yeah, even if it is just, another situation to practice on, maybe it's a situation that you haven't had to work on in a while, and it's like, okay, well, this is coming back up for me. This was a theme, and I had worked on it for 10 years, and now it's just like checking in, like, are you still good with this?
Yes, and that's a very important part that, like, I like to say that when you do set a new intention, prepare for life to give you 3 challenges. But then you may go a year or years before it brings it back around to just a little check-in of like, hey, where are you still at with this?
Yeah, I thought we were going to be able to quickly end this episode before Alexander turned into dark, but we didn't. But anyway, yeah, I was at the end, so let's say our goodbyes, Alexander.
Yeah, and we'll apologize for the technical difficulties. We're working with a camera issue, overheating, so we'll work to get that resolved. But good to connect. Reach out to us with your feedback about these subjects. We touched on a few subjects that's just out there in the ethers, and how do you feel about it? So we'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, I think we could even do an episode more on other procrastination scenarios if people do have questions and stuff like that. I think that's a big one. So anyway, with that, I appreciate you all joining us. See you next time.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this free version of the Wise podcast. To hear the complete conversation and go deeper into the application of the tools and techniques of the Just Philosophy, head on over to wisewisepodcast.com and become a premium member. You'll get to hear all of our complete conversations, including the complete episodes of our Inward Journey story series and our entire back catalog, and continue your self-development journey with us. We honor your dedication to self-growth, overall wellness, and continuing to ask the wise.
And remember, gradual changes over long periods of time equals lasting results.
Continue on your self-growth journey by visiting thejustphilosophy.com, where you are able to connect personally by booking a private consultation with Alexander in person, by phone, or Zoom. Uncover your authentic self more easily with a human design or destiny card consultation. Here you will gain information about your energetic makeup, personality, and your higher self, as well as navigating your way through your relationships. There are also multiple types of reports available for purchase that help you gain insight into your career, relationships, and opportunities for self-growth. The site also allows you to view a calendar of Alexander's live performances and class schedule, peruse other products such as shirts, CDs, and finally, the revolutionary VibroTune vibrational sound therapy tables. These contoured therapy tables allow you to bathe in a vibrational sonic bath of frequencies, bringing you into alignment on all levels. You will be feeling and hearing calming music synced through vibration and frequency. So again, you can grab all this goodness at thejustphilosophy.com, thejustphilosophy.com. The Just Philosophy, as discussed in this podcast, has been developed by Alexander over the last 25 years in his personal studies, private practice, and professional environment. The information discussed is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant as a replacement for conventional medicine. Just remember, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Seek the wise. We want to thank you for working on you. Keep shining your light and refining your vibe.